Hey there, and welcome to That News You Care About, a weekly video game news show from the folks over at That Nerdy Site. Today is Tuesday, July 12th of 2022, and I'm one of your hosts, Logan Wilkinson. Joining me, as always, is my Phoenix son, Trevor Starkey.
Hello.
How you doing, Trev? You went to Disney?
Went to
did
Disney.
The 4th of July things? Yeah.
Back from Disney, back from 4th of July things. Good. I had like a nice couple days, kind of like a cool down from my trip.
Nice.
Then I had to go into work for like one day, and then I had like my normal weekend. So it was
It's not bad at all.
It's been a pretty chill last week and a half, and Disney was nice. It was probably gonna be my last trip for a while, so kind of tried to savor it as much as I could.
Perfect. I love that. Well, while Trevor was out enjoying Mickey and Minnie and Goofy and all the fun happenings at Avenger Campus, the video game news just kept on coming here. We've got a couple big things. We started off, of course, with the release date of maybe That Nerdy Site's most anticipated game of 2022, with God of War Ragnarok's release date officially being unveiled. With the date of November 9th of 2022. Trevor, we'll kind of get into the larger release date and kind of what we think of that and what we kind of think it might do with the game itself. But before we do that, I kind of want to run through kind of your own personal feelings on that release date, mixed with, obviously, the, what's a good word, intense or really passionate kind of fans of God of War kind of getting into this overly excited state and increasingly being frustrated by the delay in announcing when the game's release is going to come out. Kind of what was your take, right, from kind of seeing the fan reaction and getting the actual date and kind of what you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, I was largely bereft from the that reaction beforehand. I don't think I heard about it until I started seeing like people retweet, like Corey retweeting something or something like that, where like because what seemed to have like flared it all up was like supposed leakers basically saying like there's going to be a big announcement on this day, then that day comes and goes and people get mad, and it like that too often people just get like super caught up in those kinds of things, and I've largely tuned them out at this point. I mean, because the people who do that, like they will believe any tweet that they see, like seemingly, regardless of. Especially, I don't remember if we talked about it on this show. I think we did at some point, but like there was I think I included it as like a shout out because it was basically like how somebody went through and just completely faked being an inside leaker. And it was basically like they tweeted a shit ton of things from a private account before an event. And then after the event happened, they deleted all the ones that didn't actually happen or like weren't real, and then like made it a public account, and then started kind of like basically like doing a ghost campaign to be like, or a whisper campaign to be like, did you see this account that like accurately predicted all these things? Mm-hmm. And the guy did that, blew up, went viral, and then basically like wrote into Kotaku or somebody and was like, here's how I did it. Like, don't trust these things that come out of nowhere and don't have any kind of validation, because they can be very easily done. Like he showed basically like, here are all the deleted tweets that I did, because you just throw shit at the wall and then like make it look like
stick, right?
Yeah, like, you know, enough of them can be like, or you can be vague enough about them that like, you know, you can just kind of allude to something. It's like, oh look, like your Resident Evil's there, haha, I was right about Resident Evil being there or something. And
a major game announcement, right? Yeah.
And so like the one of the big ones that I saw that was like getting a lot of traction for tweeting being like, this is going to be here, had just also had like a very poor track record of like predicting a whole bunch of things that didn't come true. So it's like, but people get, you know, excited for the one thing that they want to see happen. And like describing these people as fans, I think is the same kind of bullshit as like describing the people who are out there like creating a 2.5 hour long movie cut of Obi-Wan Kenobi as fans. It's like, I don't think you're a fan if you're trying to like actively work against the developer or the fans that go on these kind of hate campaigns about the Reva or something like that, or the people who are out there, the Marvel fans that are out there downvoting Miss Marvel, and shit like that. Like,
yeah.
So I think the people who are out there, quote unquote, as fans, tweeting and harassing developers, be it Corey or just other people on the team who have Sony Santa Monica in their bio or something like that. And one of the tweets that I did see making the rounds that I think is referenced in this article was like the lady who's like, I don't care how many how many dick pics you send me. I'm not going to reveal the release date. When has that ever worked? Is just like, that's just a much broader problem of horrible misogyny and shit online through the anonymity, not even like industry specific, just the anonymity of the internet. People just like pulling shit like that is disgusting and horrible. And so like all of that in the lead up to this, I was just like, that sucks that all of that is happening, and like, boo to any of that. I'll take a date whenever they want to give me a date. Take your time. Yeah. I'm very excited for God of War Ragnarok, but I've kind of spent the entire year not really expecting it to hit this year. And even with this date announcement, I'm like, cool. I hope it does. I'm not going to like get my hopes up too much about it.
Right.
And like, even if I, hop in here in a couple days and like pre-order, the big collector's edition that's about to go on sale, if a month from now I get an email saying, hey, we've actually had to push that to 2023, I'm going to be like, all right, that's fine. I'll play it in 2023. Like, I don't need it to, I'm not defining my life around the release of this game in any meaningful way. So I will enjoy it when it comes, I hope. And I have no problem if they take as much time as they need to polish that thing up good.
Yeah, I mean, I think you really hit the head on the nail there in terms of the kind of unfortunate reality that anything popular or not popular, I guess, is really just anything that exists in the world that people know about are going to have both people who genuinely enjoy it and understand it and appreciate the thing for what it is and can love that, and then also people who are just going to be toxic assholes about this thing, right? And really kind of annoying gatekeepers, or just completely misunderstand the very spirit and letter of what the thing is to begin with, right? The people who kind of say like, keep like politics out of my stories and movies and games, ignoring the fact that all of these things are inherently political. I mean, I think it is unfortunate, right? They're in some ways the kind of online personification of like the toxic misogyny that I think can be found in some of the PS3 God of War games, but without the growth that we see in God of War 2018. And that's a shame, right? Like, I think, The Last of Us has the same kind of weird toxic community around it as well, with like some of the stuff about certain characters and certain themes in The Last of Us Part 2, or even the Left Behind DLC, going back that far. And I think to so thoroughly play a game and miss the entire point of the thing takes some amount of skill, I suppose. It takes some amount of skill and craft, same way it takes to like watch all of Star Wars and miss completely what the point of that is, and then just like trash Kelly Marie Tran or John Boyega or Rain Johnson and Last Jedi, or like any of the things in general, like, or Daisy Ridley. Like, it takes some amount of skill to do that, but make no mistake that anyone who watches or plays these things and then goes about it in such a like disgusting, despicable way is just so beyond the veil of being a fan, right?
Yeah, I mean, like,
they're just trying to leech onto something popular, and
yeah, it's like
another misunderstand it.
another recent one of the stories that's mentioned in this article is also like the Curse of Monkey Island Ron Gilbert story, where he basically like fans don't like the art style of the new game, and so they harassed him to the point that he's basically said, all right, I'm just not going to talk about this game publicly anymore. You've ruined the fun of sharing this, this project of mine. And that's that's just indicative of the shitty like social mediaification that we
even
see
Sonic
these
the
days.
Hedgehog movie, right?
That's
behind that.
Certainly a giant example of the fact that like they like went and actually kowtowed to, the reactions, stuff like that. Like, well, sure, I agree that I think the new look of Sonic is significantly better. I didn't necessarily like the first look of Sonic. I can say I don't like a thing, right? And then I'm just not gonna go and harass somebody about it online. Like the Curse of Monkey Island, I have no real affinity for that franchise. The new art style, I'm like, okay, it doesn't really do anything for me one way or the other, but I don't need to then say, fuck Ron Gilbert, fuck this art style, what are you thinking, what is wrong with you? Because that's not how a like sane, rational person reacts to a thing.
Reacts to shit, right? It's so interesting to me too, because there's a great quote that ends this Washington Post article that kind of goes into all this, which is like, this market of anticipation is used to benefit the publishers, but leaves the developers to suffer the consequences, right? And this whole weird like 2022 always online thing of like, we need to make content for YouTube videos and Twitch videos, but also for like IGN blogs and like all this, like everyone needs to be making content at all point in times, and everyone needs to be excited about this thing for 4 or 5 years at times, right? Sometimes longer, like in Last of Us Part 2, leads to, I think, part of this issue too, right? Where, like it benefits the publishers plenty, but the actual who are making the games have to deal with ramifications of this stuff, and people not liking one small thing, or people wanting to get the release date earlier, and then God forbid a delay happens and the uproar over that. Like it is an element of video games that unfortunately probably isn't going away, just due to the nature of how complex it is to make a modern video game, right? Like the days of getting like a Final Fantasy game every year, basically, or a Crash Bandicoot or Jack and Dexter game like every year, essentially, are just not the reality of how video games are really made anymore by big or even small studios. And so I do think it's just going to become more and more part of the kind of negatives of making really anything in an online space, but especially video games, which take so much longer than most other things.
Yeah, I mean, it's like we were talking a lot about Disney before we started recording because of my recent trip, and it's just like it seems like an entire generation is just like never heard of the thing from Bambi of like, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. Like there are plenty of things I don't like, and I just say I'm not going to tweet about those things, or I'm not going to talk about those things, or I'm not going to promote those things. Like there are plenty of games I hop into, I'm like, nope, this isn't for me. I can bounce off of this. Or even the ones that I don't like and I'm vocal about not liking, I'm not out there like harassing the people who made the game.
No.
I typically try and find like there is merit to the work, and I oftentimes respect and can understand why people do like the things that they like that I don't like. And it's just like this level of like emotional and like maturity that like there's clearly no like actual bar for that on the internet sometimes. And then there's also this idea of like, just because you're an online presence doesn't mean you are subscribing to the notion that like, yes, everybody come give me your feedback. Like it's the like, if we talk about a game and shit on it or something like that, or praise it on a show like this, the only way a developer is ever really going to find that is if they opt into listening to our show or watching us talk about
Right.
it. Like, I'm not going to, then clip out a thing from this thing and send it to them and be like, here's what I thought of your thing, because like that for me that feels like an invasion of like a thing. Like, if they didn't specifically ask for my criticism, I'm not going to go out of my way to like force it upon them.
Especially a negative criticism, right?
Yeah.
Like it to me it is sort of indicative of this almost narcissistic selfishness, right? Of like, what I think is the way that everyone has to think about this given thing, right? And if they don't, then they're wrong, right? And that's an element that the internet, like, me and Trevor are two crotchety 30-year-old men out here, I guess, but like that's an element of like the internet, like, I think sort of corrupt in a regular conversation, right? Like, in some ways, maybe me and you are just sort of like of a different tradition of like, yeah, like we each, I think, grew up in like the idea of like, yeah, like this is, we talk about games, I think, or movies or TV shows in a vein of like, we're two best friends sitting on a couch having a conversation. And whether it's this show, whether it's that Bond show, whether it's that Nerdy Side show, whether it's that D Plus show, I think that is carried over in pretty much everything we do in terms of our podcast or even our write-in. And I would never just like scream at a best friend on a couch, because it wouldn't be your friend very long, probably, if they disagreed with you about Star Wars or James Bond or the release date for God of War, right? And I think some people just almost can't comprehend the fact that someone would dare disagree with how they view something, and get so vocally upset about that. And then with the kind of ability to anonymously be angry as well and like throw vitriol at someone, they're just like, well, I think you're wrong, and I'm going to tell you about it until you just leave, basically. Which sucks, because like it sort of did scuttle and diminish somewhat like the excitement of what should be like a cool piece of news, like God of War Ragnarok's release date and when it's coming out, and like, oh man, we're only 4 months away or whatever. Like that is a bit of exciting news, and whether or not we think it'll actually hit that date doesn't matter. Like, it's still exciting, and it still offers up like this idea of we're so close to the end of potentially Kratos' storyline, and certainly in this iteration that they've announced is going to be kind of the end of the Ragnarok storyline. And so like I think that's exciting, right? But instead we're having to talk about all these assholes online, in a similar vein of, so much of online content nowadays is this thing's really cool, and also ignore the people who are dumb about it and hate this thing.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we have like such a negligible audience in terms of a lot of these things, but like I have never had a problem if somebody like goes into like one of our videos and is just like an asshole and posting a shitty comment. I'll just delete that comment out. We do not owe them that as a platform at all for like, like letting them voice their opinions. If they want to be a shitty person, then they can go out and make their own shitty thing and be critical about it. And again, it's not something like, I don't think it's something we've ever even really had to deal with here, apart from maybe like a few spam bots or something like that. But like I remember in some of my older like Trevor Trove videos or something like that, I would get people like jumping in and like just posting shit things and be like, well, you like, nobody needs to see this comment, delete. Like, yeah, I don't owe you my comments section at all.
Yeah, that to me is exactly I love how you phrase it too. Like, I don't owe you the right to be an asshole on my shit, right? Like, if you're gonna be an asshole, you can go be an asshole. You can go be like a hateful piece of shit somewhere else. Go make your own thing. Oh wait, you probably can't, right? Like, that's why you're so miserable at everything else, right? Like, yeah. So anyone who leaves that kind of shit on anything on ours, just be like, delete that. Absolutely not. Like, you can go somewhere else. And like, I think, that one thing I will say is, yeah, like the statement from like Santa Monica and Corey obviously hopping in, right? Like multiple times on Twitter, right? Like they're very quick to be like, we don't want this type of person playing our games in, because you don't get it. Like, you don't get what the game is about. you don't understand who we are as people who make things, right? It turns out we're not just machines. And yeah, so I give credence to that. Shout out to them. And yeah, God of War Ragnarok, early November of 2022, allegedly. And yeah, if it does hit, it'll be, again, probably the most anticipated game of the year for the site as a whole. And if it doesn't, it'll probably be the most anticipated game of the next year.
Yeah, like, I mean, just on that side of things, it's like the fact that they threw that out there with at least enough confidence to put that date on it, whether or not they stick to it, it's still like it is a bold choice as we are still in a era where games are constantly being given dates and then delayed, to like knowingly do that, and basically say, like, we think we're going to hit this date, so we're going to announce this date. We're going to, stake our claim to the end of the year. Now that like Starfield is bumped, and now that Zelda's not coming out this year and stuff. So if they actually hit it, yeah, they pretty much have like the end of year almost all to themselves.
Right.
And I hope they can hit it, but also I hope even more so that like trying to attain that goal and hit that date is not at the expense of their personal well-being or anything like that. Like, take the time you need to make this game and make it in a healthy work environment and whatnot, and I'll play it whenever it comes out.
Right. Yeah. Agreed. Trevor, shifting over slightly, we got some news about E3 from some of our people, the people behind PAX East and West, and no longer South, I don't believe. I know it's not actually anymore South. Yeah. Yes, the E3 has announced that E3 2023 will be organized in partnership with ReedPop, the company behind, of course, PAX, EGX, Star Wars Celebration, and New York Comic Con, to name just a few. As well as the owner of GamesIndustry.biz. This from the GamesIndustry.biz article that we're reading. They announced that the two organizations will host E3 2020 in its traditional home of LA during the second week of June. All that's pretty traditional and regular. I really just wanted to get your thoughts on ReedPop taking over E3 for next year, and potentially what this could mean as a way to kind of save and make E3 a worthwhile event again.
Yeah, I mean, like when this news broke, and like the first thing I saw was E3 is coming back 2023. Like that was the big headline. But then I started seeing a lot of people have like the sub headline of, and it's not being run by ESA, it's being run by ReedPop, the people behind PAX. And I was like, well, the PAX-ification of E3 continues. Because I mean, going back to the year I went, which was 2017, I think 2017, which was the first year of like public on sale like tickets that you could buy to attend, and it wasn't like a press only event, even though like prior to that, press only was like loose terms.
Right.
But like since then, in the years since, obviously up until the pandemic, they were constantly just trying to be like, let's make more money off of the like attendees, since developers and exhibitors are leaving the show floor. So it's already been heading in that direction of, let's try and make this a more public facing event than a media centric event or a business to business centric event like its real origins. So I think bringing in ReedPop, who have ample experience with PAX, to do that is a solid call. I think ultimately the lifeblood of E3 is still going to fall behind whether or not publishers rent exhibitors rent the space, or if they continue to just do their own thing and be like, you know what, we'll skip E3. We don't really need to be there. We don't really need a presence at that event, because I think we've seen, especially with like the PAXs coming out of the pandemic, if the games don't show up, the people also don't show up.
Right.
And if like the bigger developers aren't showing up, then that's going to take a toll. I'll be curious if because obviously like things that PAX is and Star Wars Celebration have that like E3 has sort of had, but like not ever really like tied to E3 itself, is like the panel experience. In like the later years of E3, it was Jeff Keighley was doing like E3 related panels at the Microsoft Theater out there in LA. But obviously Jeff is now doing his own Summer Game Fest, kind of in opposition to E3. So I'll be curious to see if like they try and include that as an element of all of this, and if so, how that works out. But yeah, like ultimately, I'm in a wait and see kind of thing for E3. I think we've talked about this on the show, as well. Like I think especially this year when Jeff did Summer Game Fest as his online presentation, but also as like an invited industry event for people to come and do effectively his like Judges Week that he used to do around E3. I think that almost fills the gap that the media side of things was looking for. And so E3 can still fill the like, hey, come and play games public people. But if EA isn't there, if Ubisoft isn't there, if Sony isn't there, if Nintendo shows up for a direct and maybe one big booth, as they have so often in the past, I don't know that that's going to warrant audiences making that trip, compared to just watching the showcases online. And especially, if they continue doing stuff like Summer Game Fest has, where like, hey, watch the showcase and also go check out, demos of a lot of these games on Steam right now or something like that. If you can do that from your home, what's the point of paying to actually go to this event?
Go there.
What's the benefit of attending?
Right. It's such an interesting question. I mean, part of it to me is the culture around the event, right? And I think there is such a collaborative and, consumer focused nature to PAXs, right? Like that is one of the elements, right? I've never been to a PAX. I've never been to any trade show, not as press, but those shows are also not for press, right? They're very much for the people waiting in lines to go either go play games or to go do the, giant games they're having on the walls, everyone play together kind of stuff. And just like, it is all about like this collaborative, like friendly environment and spirit to PAX East and PAX West. And that I think has been built up over years and years and years to become this really ingrained nature and culture of PAX. And it just feels friendly when you're there. And that's not the culture of E3. That's not how I would describe E3's culture and kind of what you think of when you think of that event. And it's not to say that that can't be changed over time, but E3 is something that is 25 years old, right? And so it's pretty ingrained at this point in time. It's, I think it also begs the question of, as we've talked about before, if this is an event not really for consumers, and if it's not an event really for publishers or developers, who is E3 really a thing for, right? Why do we need E3, especially with this kind of like collapse and diffusion of game announcement events over the course of summer? Instead of like one big thing, we have like 15 small ones, it feels like. And so, yeah, what is the point of E3 in some ways? And if the point of E3 is to be a Southern California-based PAX event, is that enough? Is that compelling enough? Is that interesting enough for, what PAX East and West are already doing? I mean, it being in the summer sort of fits as like this in-between PAX event for like East and kind of March April and West in September. It's sort of in between that. But that also then means how much progress have the games really have gone under in 2 to 3 months, right? Versus like 5 from March to September kind of thing.
Yeah, it's also like the scale of E3 games that come to E3 versus the scale of games that go to a PAX. Like
smaller,
PAX is obviously
games,
much more indie focused, and while in their heyday, PAXs will have an ample booth from Microsoft or PlayStation or Nintendo or some of the big third parties. In recent years, they have not, and so they are significantly more indie focused events.
Mm-hmm.
Indie doesn't necessarily work for E3 just because of the price tag of going to and being at E3. It's not worth it for indie games to try and be there and make noise. So yeah, I'll be curious to see, how things shake out on that front as well.
Yeah, I agree. And just, I don't know, we've had too many conversations to get too deep into like the future of E3 and the fate of E3, but this is, I will say, one of the things that is most interesting as a potential way to kind of transform E3 into something more interesting and potentially longer lasting than if it just tried to be like a trade show going forward, because that has no future, I think, really. So I will be curious to see what they do and what they do to both make it similar to PAX, but also probably make it try to feel distinct from PAX as well.
I'll also say, like,
yeah, I'm not sure.
This is like the PAX-ification of an E3 is much more interesting to me than like those leaked pitch decks that were coming out from like a couple years ago, where it was like, hey, a big old chunk of this is going to be Fortnite, and a big old chunk of this is just going to be big Twitch streamers that we're going to try and like bring in for activations and stuff.
Right.
And because at the end of the day, I don't see the big first parties or third parties that have left coming back to E3, even with ReedPop, taking. I still think if they're gonna have any kind of presence, it's going to be offsite presence doing their own events during that same time frame, where they're in a controlled space. They're probably paying significantly less than convention center downtown LA costs, or they're gonna just do stuff remotely and maybe do a digital event, both in terms of like a showcase as well as, hey, and also you can download these demos or something through PlayStation Plus or through EA Play or through Steam or whatever. Like the dissolution of like needing a centralized, let's bring everybody together, is not a thing that is needed in the digital age, as the last few years have shown. And I imagine all those studios that are still seeing record sales and record profits, and not having to throw money into big glitzy glamorous events. It's the same reason like we don't see those ridiculous, like, hey, we're flying media to Europe for a WWE event or something like that, like we did in like the 2010s or early 2010s or something like that, or the late 2000s.
Late 2000s.
We don't see those extravagant things anymore because it doesn't make sense fiscally, as more and more of these companies are like, hey, yeah, let's focus on getting our message directly to the audience, as opposed to through intermediaries of the media or they're just kind of they're finding cheaper ways of doing all these things.
Right. Agreed. Trevor, any final thoughts before we pivot to the shoutouts?
I will say I do appreciate one of the things that the Game Informer or Game Industry article highlights is that media registration is going to be streamlined and given added security following through ReedPop after ESA botched that thing for the last couple of times they've done it. So yeah, shout outs to because like ReedPop, obviously, like we've had our information all go through ReedPop for PAXs and stuff, and like I get a ton of like emails from every developer under the sun that's trying to sell their game to me or something like that. Like I'm definitely on those lists, but I'm not getting like spam email on top of that, or I've never been doxxed because of a PAX email distribution list. So here's hoping that's a better experience for everybody involved compared to ESA and just the shithousery that they did.
Agreed. Trevor, you've got a shout out. I've got a shout out. Shout out yours first.
I got a pair of shout outs, so we can do one for me, then maybe yours, and then I'll come back for mine. Shout out to, and I feel like I shout her out quite often these days, but our friend Jessica Howard shared an article last week. Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion team discusses changes coming to the game and if Zack or Cloud is the better character. She got to sit down and interview Nomura, I think, or if not Nomura, like she interviewed like Final Fantasy people over there for GameSpot, and that's just super cool. Yeah, Nomura. She got to interview big Final Fantasy named people with GameSpot, and so shout out to her, specifically this being a focus on the upcoming Crisis Core game, the remake, and whether it's going to be like Crisis Core just up-resed, or if they're going to try and like play with Crisis Core in the same way that they played with the story of Final Fantasy VII Remake. And it's very much like this is going to be a faithful retelling of Crisis Core. We're not going to change that story around. So shout out to Jess for that article.
Agreed. I shared a pair of articles, but they're essentially the same thing. All about NASA's new telescope, the Webb telescope. Both one from NASA and one from the New York Times. NASA gets into kind of the, obviously, as you'd imagine, the science-y behind the kind of telescope and what you're viewing and the amazing images we've been seeing. The New York Times one has got some real good writing and flowery language that I love as well. All about the dawn of their ancient universe. I have been absolutely enraptured by all the images we've seen over the last 48 hours from the Webb telescope. I've changed my wallpaper background on my phone. I've taken lots of screenshots, lots of great images. I've been texting people. I love space. It is one of my genuinely favorite things in the entire world. And I think these images are absolutely mind-blowing and beautiful. And instead of being someone who feels... I think almost like, I know some people do feel almost like scared and anxious by kind of the enormity of space and kind of how small people can be. I always get so excited by that, right? I always say one of my favorite things to do is just to look up at the moon and be like, we've walked there, right? And just kind of the boundless potential of humanity. I think the image is really beautiful. I say go check out all the writing and all the images you can see of it, and the Webb telescope and Hubble telescope have got some fun Twitter back and forth as well, as Webb kind of surpasses Hubble as the new kind of landmark telescope. So I encourage everyone to go get their science on. Some of the images make me feel like I'm straight up looking at a Star Wars movie or, Dune, or I'm playing Mass Effect, and I love it, and I think it's so cool. And so I encourage everyone to go check out all of that.
I'll say in my work Slack, I saw somebody posted space stuff in our all company thread this morning, but I was too busy with work and I didn't get a chance to really dive into it. So I've pulled it up here, and yep, it was basically this. It was the NASA.gov first images that you're sharing here. And shout out to the 60, 70 people at my office that also liked that post and are fans of space.
It's so cool. Yeah.
Very cool. So my other shout out to friend of the show, Belinda Garcia, who made the announcement yesterday that she is now a game writer and narrative designer over at Crystal Dynamics, working on the future of Tomb Raider and Lara Croft. So shout out to Belinda. It's always great seeing friends making really cool moves in this industry. Wanted to give some love her way as well.
Yeah. I agree. Those are the shout outs for this episode. Thank you for watching or listening. If you like what you heard, you can go over to thatnerdysite.com and check out all the latest reviews, features, and podcasts going live there. You can also go over to youtube.com/thatnerdysite, where you might already be for the YouTube video version of this show. If so, leave a like, comment, tell us what your thoughts on space, on God of War Ragnarok, on E3 being taken over by ReedPop are.
But don't be a dick or I'll delete your comment.
Don't be a dick. We'll delete it real quick. We're ready for it. You can also go over to the podcast service of your choice if you're listening to this and like and subscribe to the feed there. Rate and review us on iTunes. Give us 5 stars. Tell us what you like about us. Otherwise, you can go find Trevor at Trevor J. Starkey on the internet. Trev, anything that you want to plug?
2 shout-outs. One shout-out to this week's That Nerdy Site show, where Cam and I, as we often do, following the latest Marvel release, sat down and did our spoiler cast thoughts on Thor: Love and Thunder. So that was a fun conversation. So you can go check that out. And then in honor of my time at Disney last week, if you go check last week's Let's Plays on Tuesday and Thursday, I did Let's Plays dedicated to Disney stuff, a la Lego Indiana Jones, because I knew I was going to do the Indiana Jones ride at Disneyland, and then also Epic Mickey 2. So you can go see little Let's Plays for both of those games. And if you want to see me just get angry for an hour, you can watch the Tuesday Let's Play of this week, which was me playing the first hour-ish of Crash Bandicoot 4, because I don't know why I put myself through that. I know I don't like that game, but it's a PlayStation Plus game, so I figured, what the hell?
There you go. I love that. Everyone go check out all of that good stuff. Anytime Trevor does anything, check it out. I encourage you. It's always good. You can go find me at LeftyLoggy or LeftyLoggy, LOGGY. In addition to echoing the shout out, let's run through the rigmarole here. To go check out the Let's Plays happen on youtube.com/thatnerdysite. To go check out That Nerdy Site show. To go check out That D Plus show, where this week we will be doing, I don't really know if we've talked about it yet, but I assume Miss Marvel finale.
Yeah, it's it'll be the Miss Marvel season wrap up.
As well as going to check out That Bond show, all 26 episodes live over there on the youtube.com exclusive series. And finally, go and check out all the great writing and podcasts we have going live on That Nerdy Site proper. In particular, I'll give a shout out to, I ran through everything and I wasn't ready for it. In particular, I'll give a shout out to That Nerdy Site show. As always, I think that is one of the most fun shows we do. And I really enjoy always going to be a part of that conversation there. You can go find That Nerdy Site at That Nerdy Site all across the internet. For myself, for Trevor, for all of us here at That News You Care About, play your games and be good to each other.